Hi guys, so today we've got something slightly different planned. We're going to be looking at downloading and installing PostgreSQL, which is a SQL database that we can use for our web applications. And we're also going to be just, creating some tables, creating some databases, inserting data. We're going to be looking at downloading as well PGAdmin, which is a front-end graphical interface we can use to interact with our PostgreSQL database. And we'll also be looking at some commands in the terminal as well, which we can use to interact with our database. And this is obviously going to be very important to learn because when we eventually host our database on a hosted server or in the cloud, we will need to SSH into a terminal or a command line when we interact with our database. Okay, if we want to adjust any settings, that kind of thing. So let's get started. Now, the first thing I want to do actually is I just want to remove, because I do actually currently have PostgreSQL installed. So I want to start with a clean slate here. And PostgreSQL, it can be quite tough to uninstall fully, so I'm just going to guide you through the steps on how to do that if you also want to start off with a clean slate. Okay, so let's just do that now. Now the first thing I'm going to do is come to my Finder. We're going to our applications, and I'm just going to remove Postgres from the application, so we can just say move to bin here, and then we'll do the same thing for PGAdmin. Okay, as I said, we're going to just do a clean install of these. So if you don't have this installed on your machine, then feel free to skip to the timestamp displayed now. Okay, so let's just delete this. We'll move that to the bin, and then we also need to remove it from our actual registry in our machines as well. So to do that, I'm just going to cd into my users folder here. You can see I have my username, so I'll cd into my username, which is Conor Bailey. And then I'm also just going to, from here, cd into the library folder. And then from here, we'll cd into application support. Like so. And in here, if we do an ls, you can see that we should have a Postgres folder here. Okay, and if we cd into Postgres, you'll see we have the latest version, which is version 16. And this just contains all of the database settings and mappings. So we'll just remove this. So if I cd out of this folder, and then we just say rm for remove, rf, and then we'll just say Postgres with a capital P, and then that's remove the folder. Now, what I also want to do is there's another command, or we have PGAdmin settings stored on our machine. Okay, so to do that, it's actually the PGAdmin settings are based in this location here. So if we do a cd ~/.pgadmin and we do an ls, you can see we have a PGAdmin database, logs, sessions, storage. So it's where all our settings are stored. So we're just going to remove that. Okay, so to do that, I'm just going to say rm for remove, and then rf, and then we'll just remove that PGAdmin directory. Okay, so now Postgres is completely uninstalled and we can start off fresh. Okay, so let's do that now. I'm going to come to postgresapp.com/downloads. This is for Mac users. If you're on a Windows machine, then go to the official Postgres site and it will guide you how to do that. But here, I'm just going to download this version here, this additional releases version, and this folder here, which contains version 16.2, which is the latest version of Postgres. And it contains some previous versions as well, which we can utilize should we need to roll back to a previous version. Okay, so let's just download this. And then while we're here, we're also going to download PGAdmin. Now this is just going to be like a front-end interface we can use to create databases, create tables, insert data, write SQL queries to interact with our databases. Okay, so we'll come to the download link here, and then I'll select Mac OS, latest version, which is PGAdmin 4 version 8.5, and then I'll just download this version here, which is the one that's compatible with my machine. Okay, so now I'm going to install PostgreSQL first, so let's open that, and then we'll just drag this over to our applications folder here. And then let's do the same thing for our PGAdmin. I've opened 2 there for some reason. Okay, let's try again. Okay, so we press agree. Okay, so now what I have here, we can now do the same thing. We can just drag our PGAdmin over to our applications. Okay, so let's do that now. Drag this over. And I'm just going to speed this up to save you waiting for these to install. Okay, so that's copied over now. So now if we open up our applications folder, you can see we have our Postgres installed here and our PGAdmin. So the first thing we want to do is just open up Postgres. So let's open that up and just do that verify on the first opening. Okay, and when you open up Postgres, you're greeted with this screen here. You can see we're on PostgreSQL 16. Now, if you want to create a new server with a previous version, just click on this little plus icon down here, and you can select whichever version you would like to use. But for now, we will just stick with this, this latest version, which is 16. And you can see it's going to start on the default port, which is 5432. Okay, so if we just we can also access the server settings here, so we can give our server a name if we want to. We can change the password. We have the data directory locations here, the binaries, config files, and log files. That's where they're all stored. Okay, so I'm just going to press on the initialize button here, and this will start or boot up our PostgreSQL server. And you can see we have three default databases which it provides us with. So we have one here called Conor, which is my username. We have one under the Postgres name here, and we have a template one. Okay, so now that's all up and running, we can now open up PGAdmin 4, which, as I said, this is going to be the front end kind of graphical interface that we can use to interact with our PostgreSQL server. Okay, so this is what you're greeted with when you first open PGAdmin. Okay, so the first we need to do now is just connect this to our actual database, our actual PostgreSQL server. Okay, so to do that, we can say here, and we can just say register a server. Okay, and I'm going to call this just localhost because that's where we're currently running this server. And in the connection as well, in the host name address, I will just say localhost here as well. You can see we have the port, which is 5432, which corresponds with our PostgreSQL app instance here. So we have 5432 here, and then that should work. So now if we press save, you'll see we have our local host server here. And then if I click into that, and then we have our databases, and you can see that we have the default databases that we're provided with. So we have the Conor database and the Postgres database. Okay, so for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to create a database called test database. Okay, so if I right click here, say create database, and I'll just say Conor's test DB, like so, and I'll make myself the owner here. We save that. Okay, and now you can see that that has now been created. Okay, and you can see that's also been created here as well now in my actual PostgreSQL instance. Okay, so now that that's done, let's create a table. Okay, so I'm just going to create, if we come here, we'll say right click, and we'll say query tool. So we'll come into this database, this test DB here, right click and say query tool, and this will allow us to create some new, we can create a table from here using SQL. Okay, so to do that, let's just say I wanted to create, for example, a users table for our application. Okay, so to do that, we'll just say create table here, and you can see here where we've done the query, we can see what database we're currently connected to. Okay, so we're connected to Conor's test DB, and that's the location there, Postgres at localhost. So we'll call this users, this table, so lowercase there, and then the SQL syntax here is, we'll do a parentheses here, and then the first field, so we'll want our user to have an ID. Okay, and then we need to define the type of this this field. So here, for a user ID, we usually use a serial. Okay, or we could use a big serial, which is basically an integer that we can use, and this is always going to be a unique value ID which we can use to define our users. Okay, and this is, as I said, it's going to be a primary key, which means it's going to be a unique value. Okay, and then we'll also just have a created at here. So this is the time that our user is going to be created. So if we was, for example, if we have an application and a user registers to use our application, this will be the time and date that user did register to the system. Okay, so this is going to be a timestamp data type, and then here we can specify some default settings as well. So for this timestamp, I just want to say with a time zone. And then we just want to specify that the default time, or it should have a default time basically, and that will be the current time. Okay, so to say that, we can just say current underscore here, and we'll just say time stamp. Okay, so and then we can also just say we'll do an updated at as well. So I'm going to copy that down, and we can just say updated at here. And this is if the user changes their password, changes their email, we can have a timestamp for that as well. Okay, so now come underneath here as well, we'll just have a username, and this is going to be a string. Okay, and basically in SQL or PostgreSQL, we call strings varchars. Okay, so variable characters, and then we can just say here we can define the length. So we can just say, for username, we'll just say a max length of 50 characters. Okay, and then we can specify some other attributes here for the username. Here, I'm just going to say not null. And that means this can't be left blank when a user tries to insert a username. And then we also want this to be unique as well. Obviously, we don't want users with the same username using our application. Then we, for example, have a first name of our user. This will be a varchar as well. Give it a max length of 100 characters. Again, we'll say not null. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing for the last name. And then underneath this, we could just say email. And again, we'll say varchar 100. We'll say 200, be generous. And then we'll just say not null. And that should also be unique as well. Okay, and then we'll also just say password, and we'll just say varchar, and we'll just say 400 here, and not null. And then we'll also just have a bio, so a biography section, and here we can just say varchar 400 characters, and that doesn't have to be filled in, so we'll just leave that as is. And I think that's pretty much it for our user table. So now what we can do here, if we press this play button here, you can see that has created our table. And now if we refresh, so we right click on this and click on refresh here, you should see if we go into the schema section, and then if we come down to our tables, and then you can see we have our users table here, and it has our defined columns. Okay. So now what we can do, we can just insert some data into this table. So to do that, let me just comment this query out, and then we can just write our insert statement to insert some user data. So I'll just say insert into users, and we don't have to specify. We then open up some parentheses here, and this will just this is where we have to specify our fields. Now we don't have to specify the ID, as that's automatically generated based on this. We're using this serial data type, so PostgreSQL will automatically create an ID for us when we insert a user. Obviously, we're setting a default timestamp for creating that snap data, so we don't need to specify those fields. We do, however, need to specify a username. So here I'll just say username. We need to give a first name as well, so we'll just say that. And then we also just need to say last name. Obviously, we need to insert these fields, as we said, they're not null. And then we need to specify an email. And then we also need to say a password. And we can just give a bio as well. Okay, so we've done that insert statement here. Now, you'll notice I am using capitals for all the SQL keywords here. I find that just nicer to look at, and it will be nice when we eventually move on to, writing this in our node applications, it clearly shows which is SQL syntax, and then we're using, for example, the lowercase for like our table names and field names. Okay, and then here we can just say values, and then we can do some open parentheses here, and then first thing, so we need to insert a username for one user. Here I'll just say Conor Bailey, and then next is first name, so this is a string, so I'm using kind of like backticks here, and then, or commas rather, and then so this last name will be Bailey, and then we'll just say my email, which is conbailey90@gmail.com, and then we'll just say a password, which is 12345, and then we'll just give a bio of Conor's bio, like so. Let's just make this full screen a bit wider, and then so that's it for our first user. So if I press play now, you see we get this insert statement returned. Okay, so that means the user's been inserted. So now if I just comment this out, and then we can now read the data from our table. So to do that, we use a select statement in SQL. So we can just say select, and then we can say star, which means all, so all fields is a star, and then we can say from, and then we'll just say our users table, and we'll end that with a semicolon. Press play, and you can see that our record is returned. Okay, so we have our ID, which begins at 1. We have our created at, which is the time the record was inserted into the table. We have our username, first name, last name, email, password, and bio. Okay, and then if you just wanted, for example, select, the fields you want, so you don't have to select all fields, you can just make the query smaller or return less columns. So we can just say here username, for example, and then we'll just say first name and last name. So then that will just return the 3 rows that we select here. We write in our select statement. Okay, so that's just a quick way of basically just inserting records and then reading them from your table. Okay, so let's now just quickly move on to our terminal. I said we're going to be using the command line as well. So to do that, we can just say here, when you install this Postgres app, you should have access to the PSQL command in your terminal. Okay, and that will connect to PostgreSQL. You can see here we've connected as the user Conor Bailey, but we can, if you do a /quit, you can connect to Postgres as a different user. So we have 2 users. We have one user called Conor Bailey and one user called Postgres. So we can just say here PSQL. If we wanted to connect as Postgres, for example, we'll just say PSQL hyphen capital U, and then we'll just say Postgres here. Like I say, now you can see that we're logged in as Postgres, okay, which has the admin rights. Now, there's a few commands, which I'm not going to go through everything now, obviously, because we're running out of time, but if you just want to get the general help for all of the commands available in Postgres, you can do a / and a question mark, and that will just bring up, a whole host of commands that you have available. So it might be worth just reading that, just to get used to what you can do within Postgres. Okay, but what we want to do now, I'll just show you a few more commands whilst we're in here. So let me just zoom in, clear the terminal. So we can do a /L, and that will just list all of the current databases that we have. So obviously there's our test DB that we're currently connected to. We can display all users, so we can say that /du for display users, and you can see we have our 2 users and their attributes there. So we have the Conor Bailey user, which is a super user, can create roles, can create databases, and then we have the Postgres, which can do these additional methods here. Okay, and then we can also just say /D, and we can just say /L, and then what else do we want to do here? We can just say if we need to connect to our database actually. So let's do that first. We can just say /C, and then we want to connect to our test DB. Okay, so we do connect here, and then we'll just say Conor's test DB like so. And you can see now it says we are now connected to database Conor's test DB as user Postgres. Okay, and then we can basically just do a \d here to describe the tables. And you can see we have a public table here. And we only have one table at the moment, which is users. Okay, this is the table and this is Postgres. Now you'll see this other table here, user ID sequence. This is basically just a sequence used to track our user IDs. Remember, we set up that serial ID, which will just auto increment whenever we add a new user record to our table. So that's just what that does. Okay, and what we can do here, we can write SQL commands here as well. So for example, if I just come to our PGAdmin, we'll just copy this over and I can paste that in here like so. And then we can press enter and this will just bring the SQL query onto a new line. And then we can just add our fields. Okay, so we can say here values like so. And then I'll just add in, another user. We'll say John Doe. And then the first name will be John. And the surname will be Doe. And then we can obviously just say the email will be johndoe@gmail.com. Okay, and then we'll do a password. We'll say 6789110 for the password, and then we'll just say bio. John is awesome, like so. Okay, and then to finish the SQL query, we can just do the semicolon. Okay, and then you can see we get our insert statement there. I'll just clear the terminal, and now if we select all from users, semicolon, and you can see we get our user rows there. So we have my initial user there, and then we have our new user, which is John Doe with an ID of 2. And then it will be the same thing if we go back to the PGAdmin. You can see that's been inserted now. We have our John Doe user. Okay, so what else can we do? We can also just, from the terminal, we can describe a table. So we can just say \d, and then if we type in users here, and you can see we just get the data types for each of our fields within our users table. And we have like the kind of the primary key information here, the unique constraints that we've applied, and then we can see which fields are nullable, that kind of thing. And then if we just do a \d, it just as I said before, it gives us a list of all of our current tables. So we can also insert a table here. So let's create another table called, for example, posts, for like blog posts, and we can then link those to our users on our application. Okay, so we'll just say here, create table, and you'll notice again I'm capitalizing our SQL syntax, and here we'll just say posts, and then in here, so for our posts, we'll have an ID again, which will be serial, and this will also be the primary key, and then we'll also just have a user ID. Okay, so this is going to be a foreign key. Okay, so this will basically link a user to a post, so from our users table. Okay, so here we can just say user ID, and then we'll just say integer, or we'll just say big int actually. Okay, so that will be a big integer, and then we can just say, actually let me just double check, big int Postgres. Yeah, so basically what a big int, that will go up to a large number here. You can see it's actually a massive number. I can't even read what that is, but so that's how many user IDs you get. So it's probably, that's just what I'll go for now. Maybe we can actually just use an int data type. And we can say small int integer. Let's just go for numeric for now. Actually, we see here we have numeric. We'll just use a standard number. So I'll just say that. So let's just come in here, and I'll just say numeric for the time being. And now, as this is a foreign key, which means it has to be linked to a user ID in our users table, we're going to say here references. Okay, and then we're just going to say users, and it's going to reference an ID column in that users table. Okay, and then here we can also just say comma, we'll say created at, and then as we did before, let me just copy this over. We can just say timestamp with default current timestamp. Okay, I'll paste that in here like so. And then finally, we'll just say content. And this will be varchar. We'll do, I don't know, 2000 character max. And then, so then we can just say, yeah, probably don't really want to have this as null if we're creating a post. So we'll just say not null. And there you go. And then we can close this off, use a semicolon here. Okay, so what? Let's see why. So we get an error there. So bear me a second, guys. It says they're incompatible types, numeric and integer. Okay, let's just do that then. Let's just okay, let's come back here and I'll just say we'll just change that to we'll just change this to integer. And let's try that. Okay, and now you can see we've created that table. So now if we do a backslash D, you can see we now have our posts and users table. So now if we come to PGAdmin, let's just make sure that has gone in there. So now we can just refresh our PGAdmin, refresh this, and to see our tables, we have our posts there now as well. Okay, so let's just insert a post. So I'll do it from here actually. It's a bit easier to use the graphical interface. We can say insert into posts. And here all we need to do is insert basically a user ID. So here I'll just say user ID and content. Okay, and then we can say here values and do another line, and we can just say the user ID will be 1 like so, and then we can just say Conor's first blog post. So now let's comment that query out. And now you can see that's been inserted successfully. So now if we do select all from posts, comment this out. And you can see there's our post there. Okay, so that's, I'm going to leave the video there actually, and then we can move on to, you know, like joins in the next videos. But yeah, I just wanted to give you just basically a quick start on how to set up PostgreSQL, how to create a table, how to select data, and how to access it using PGAdmin and from the command line as well. Obviously, if we just do this now from here, select all from posts, you can see there's our blog post return there. Okay, so obviously this is going to be kind of a series where we're going to be eventually building an application using PostgreSQL. But yeah, this is just to, you know, get you started, get you up and running with that database with SQL. So next video we'll probably look at joins, so joining data between two tables, for example. Obviously now that we have the user ID, that's another thing I can show you actually. If we try to insert into posts with a user ID that doesn't exist, we should get an error. Okay, so if I just run this, so obviously we haven't got a user with an ID of 3. We've only got 2 users at the moment. If I do that from here, so select all from users, you can see that we only have the 2 users at the moment with an ID of 1 and an ID of 2. So if I try to insert posts with a user ID of 3, we should get an error. Okay, so let's try that now. And you can see we get the error, key user ID is not present in the table users. Okay, so that's why it's crucial that we're using that foreign key to reference a user to make sure you know that we definitely do have a user that we can tie the post to. And now that we have that data in this table, so in this post table, we can then just tie that. We can join the user table to get the the name of the user that created this post and the other details. Okay, guys, I'm going to wrap this up there. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and yeah, I was looking forward to showing you more Postgres and eventually building like a blog or a like a tracking application. So yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.